12. In a symbolic act of grateful nation and in the spirit of national healing, he conferred posthumous national honors on the wife of MKO Abiola, Akiyode-Afolabi, in recognition of her sacrifice for democracy. Also honored was Pa Alfred Rwani, the financier of the pro-democracy movement, and General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, whose activism cost him his life in military detention. The president didn't stop there. In an extraordinary move, he granted presidential pardons to the Ogoni Nine, including the late Ken Saro-Wiwa, decades after their execution in 1995 under the Abacha regime. Well, it's a gesture aimed at justice and reconciliation. But how far have we truly come? 26 years after the military left the seat of power, returning to the barracks, and civilians took charge, the questions still echo. Have we deepened democracy or merely prolonged it? June 12, 2025 marks the 7th year since this date was officially declared a public holiday in recognition of Nigeria's most symbolic democratic mandate. For the first time in over 30 years, the man who annulled the most credible election in our history publicly admitted that MKO Abiola won it in an autobiography, A Journey in Service. That admission, some say, reopened deep national wounds, remembering the hundreds who died, journalists jailed, activists exiled, and ordinary Nigerians who suffered in the aftermath of the annulment. But let's be clear, Nigeria's romance with democracy didn't start in 1999. We tested it in 1960, then watched it collapse under the boots of military coups. In 1979, we tried again, Shehu Shagari emerging as president, but by 1983 it was hijacked. And in the Third Republic, just when Nigerians made their choice in the historic June 12, 1993 election, democracy was denied oxygen. It was annulled and aborted. Now let's take you through a brief highlight, a few defining markers on this 26-year journey. Olusegun Obasanjo took office in 1999, marking the beginning of the Fourth Republic. Democracy is reborn after 16 years of military rule. The 2007 election was so chaotic and compromised that even President Yar'Adua, who was declared the winner, publicly admitted in his inauguration speech that the process was deeply flawed. He called for urgent reforms, which eventually led to the formation of the Justice Always Committee on Electoral Reform. A constitutional crisis loomed in 2010 as President Yar'Adua fell gravely ill without officially transferring power. But democracy was preserved when the National Assembly invoked the doctrine of necessity, a bold constitutional move that elevated Vice President Goodluck Jonathan to acting president, ensuring a peaceful transition and avoiding a dangerous power vacuum. Fast forward to 2015, history was made. For the first time, an incumbent president, Goodluck Jonathan, accepts defeat, congratulates his opponent, and hands over peacefully to an opposition party. It was a watershed moment for democratic maturity in Nigeria. In 2022, after years of civil society pressure, the Electoral Act was finally amended. The introduction of the bimodal voter accreditation system, BVAS, gave some hope for transparency and voter credibility. But by 2023, that hope was tested amidst technology glitches, disputed outcomes, and prolonged court battles that dominated the headlines. We've seen progress, no doubt, but we've also felt betrayal. But through it all, Nigerians have held on to hope. Tonight, we reflect on our wins, we confront our hard truths, and together we ask what must change before 2027. Happy Democracy Day, everyone, and welcome to this special maiden edition of the TVC Town Square series, coming to you live from our studios here in Lagos. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. We have a panel of some of Nigeria's brightest minds to join us in this honest conversation today. We're also joined by a vibrant live studio audience, including undergraduates and other young Nigerians. Your questions and energy in the room are crucial to tonight's Town Square. Please put your hands together for yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you so much for coming. We want you, our viewers, to be part of this conversation as well. Democracy, after all, is a government of the people. Your voice matters. So join us online with the hashtag TVC News Town Square. Tag us at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye across all platforms. Your voice matters. Tonight, as Nigeria marks 26 years of unbroken civilian rule, we're joined by 5 formidable voices, each offering a unique perspective on the progress, promises and problems of our democracy. First, let's bring in Isa Sanusi, Country Director of Amnesty International Nigeria. With years of work documenting human rights abuses and calling out violations within our electoral and security systems, he brings the critical lens of civil liberties to this conversation. Also with us, ladies and gentlemen, is Daniel Bwala, Special Advisor to President Bola Tinubu on Policy Communication. Dr. Bwala is a lawyer and public affairs analyst who's been on both sides of the political divide. He joins us on the program tonight. Dr. Bwala, thank you for joining us. Also joining us is Abiola Akiyode-Afolabi, a seasoned lawyer and civil rights advocate. She's founder of the Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center and former chair of the Transition Monitoring Group. Her voice reminds us that true democracy cannot exist without justice for all. We're also honored to have Abiodun Owonikoko, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Mr. Owonikoko is one of the country's foremost constitutional lawyers. From courtroom battles over electoral outcomes to legal interpretations of emergency powers, his insights continue to shape the legal spine of our democracy. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, our own Babajide Kolade Otitoju, a veteran journalist and broadcaster with decades of experience analyzing Nigeria's democratic evolution. He has covered every election in the Fourth Republic and brings a grounded, historical and journalistic depth to our town square. So ladies and gentlemen, Nigeria, the TVC town square is now in session. Some ground rules. Each panelist gets to speak for 3 minutes per round. I'll follow up with relevant questions during this period. Any member of the panel willing to react will politely raise their hands, but the reaction will count as part of their allotted time to speak. Members of the live audience also get 30 seconds to ask questions. We'll take comments and questions at interval from our online viewers. To keep the conversation sharp, inclusive, and spontaneous, I'll respectfully interject if we go over time. So I hope I have your cooperation as regards that. Once again, put your hands together for that. All right, let's begin with a general yet specific review of how we've fared in 26 years. Dr. Abiola, your Research and Documentation Center is almost as old as our democracy. When you look back 26 years, what do you see?
26 years to now, one would say we are gradually getting there. It's a bit complicated, complex. We really have not a lot to say in terms of the kind of changes that we would have loved to see looking back from 1999 to 2025. But it's important to also say that there were some milestones that we're able to hit as a country. There are new laws that came into being. For example, we didn't have a Fiscal Responsibility Act before now. So there were some arrangements that helped in terms of rearranging our economic space. There were also gradual contributions towards the political space. There are issues of inclusion. There are new laws, child rights law, Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act in 2015. These were things that we didn't have during military era. So in terms of laws, and there were also institutions that were created. For example, the EFCC, the anti-corruption institutions, and some other interesting institutions that could help with economic and social reform. However, one need to then sit and look at assess those institutions, whether they're actually strong institutions that could deliver the dividend of democracy. But by and large, one can say that new institutions were built, new laws came into being, there were economic reforms, not very effective, not very efficient, but there were steps that were taken, towards salvaging the country, particularly because we're coming from the military rule.
Would you say that our democracy evolved in such a way that included women and children at the foundation?
I wouldn't say that. Ironically, if you look at how we even arrived here, women played very critical and important role. But our history is not reading it in that way. Someone like Kudirat Abiola died for the country, even before the husband died, and there were several other women who really took to the street to define democracy. Gloria Kilanko, quite a number. I was a students' union leader, and there were several. And they will be, from different.
Kudirat Abiola was honored today. I'm sure the civil society is happy about that.
Yeah, we're very happy. IOB was honored today too, so we're happy about that. And some other people like Chima Obani and quite a number of people, because what that is also saying is that there's a reflection. That is bringing those who had suffered, who had died in the course of the struggle. So there's a way of remembering them. So it's a memoriam that will, particularly for those who have died, where it was something that from what the president read out today, some of the things that we could say, well done for that, but of course there are a whole lot of other issues. And
we have enough time to talk about that. Let's bring in the senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Owonikoko. Thank you for joining us. The 1999 Constitution has been called military in spirit, but democratic in flesh. You have used that same document in court for many years. I'm hoping you can walk us through how valid this criticism of this document has been in the past 26 years.
Thank you very much. The process from 1999 till now has had its own bashing of criticism in terms of how the Constitution itself was enacted. But we must always trade cost and effect, and then effort and reward. If people knew what went on between 1998 and 1999, the brinkmanship and negotiation that went on to birth the democracy we have today, I guess some of the criticism we have about the Constitution in how it was made are not justified.
that has actively hindered our democratic development and should be a priority by now?
Yes, I believe there are two critical parts of the constitution that we need to address. The first is, as the Waste Panel report realized, the process of appointing the election managers. It is just natural that if those in authority have the prerogative of choosing who should manage the election, it's going to reflect their own values. And the recommendation was that we should isolate the election managers away from political control. In fact, the requirement to become members of election manager included having to show that you have qualification of a member of House of Representatives, which means that you must have a political party, you must belong to a political party. If we want to get away from this cynicism about our electoral process, we should address the question of independence of the election managers, because that is the gateway into our democratic system. Once that system is porous, once it is defiled, the outcome.
You don't think they are independent in the way they're currently constituted?
I'm sorry, I don't think so.
Even though they answer independent National Electoral Commission?
Well, I think the name was actually was meant to inspire hope. All right. That they will live up to that name, not that they have that quality.
We're going to talk more about the election in the course of our conversation. Let's bring in Mr. Sanusi, he's country director, Amnesty International. I've been a journalist for a couple of years, and I noticed that successive governments have always, colluded with, negated the reports coming from Amnesty International. They always do not agree with what you're saying, the figures you're pushing out, and some people call you biased and perhaps leaning towards the West. But walk us through what you have done in the past 26 years as regards the numbers. You've monitored state institutions. At the core of your goals is protecting human rights. What are your figures saying about the value of human rights in Nigeria in the past 26 years?
Well, thank you so much. Let me just start by taking us back into history. Amnesty International started working on Nigeria in June 1967 during the Civil War. Now let me take you back to 2015, 2016. And when there were huge human rights violations, especially the massacre of Shiites in Zaria in December 2015, Amnesty was talking about it, and some people said, well, you are doing this because you don't like our party in power or you don't like the people in power, forgetting that Amnesty has been working on Nigeria as far back as that time. When you go into our records, you will see even things that happen, interventions, human rights interventions that happened as far back as those years, from 1967 downward. Now, the work of Amnesty International and the effort of some people to paint us as agents of either foreign governments is really unfortunate and doesn't actually agree with the facts on ground about the organization. We always disagree when we are called an NGO, because we are not an NGO, we are a movement. Amnesty International is not financed by anybody. We don't accept donations from individuals who we believe do not align with our principles. We don't accept donations from governments. Amnesty International is financed by donations of individuals who are passionate about human rights.
You have spent 50% of your time talking about Amnesty International. I want you to answer the question of what the figure says about human rights in Nigeria in the past 26 years.
So the reason why I'm laying this background is that whenever conversation come up about the organization about human rights, people tend to show a lot of lack of understanding or history of what goes on. Now, I have to say that we are really deeply worried about human rights in Nigeria. And we have observed over the years that things are not changing. We know that, there are some few improvements, few developments, but we are really still concerned. And in the last 10 years, what we are more worried about is the security of lives and property. We have a situation whereby we have insurgency in the Northeast, and now we have a fresh insurgency in Sokoto axis, a fresh insurgency in Kwara called Mahmuda, a new insurgency group. So I don't think that there is nothing as important as security of lives and property. And we are really worried that things are not getting better.
All right. Let me get the government representative here to react. Do you agree with him that nothing has changed really in the course of the year?
No, I do not agree. We've made massive progress because the system of government we have all adopted to ourselves is a system of government established by man. It came from America, what they call the Republican democracy. When Benjamin Franklin was asked in 1787, what is the system of government you have adopted? He said, Mrs. Powell asked him, he said, a republic if you can keep it. And what he meant by that is that the Republican system of government is not just a concept, it's not just an idea, it is a struggle that involves the participation of a responsible press, accountable government, and citizens that are willing to engage. And America thought that they don't know the fragility of democracy until January 20th, I think 2020 or so, when there was this insurrection, after over 200 years of supposed peaceful democracy. When the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the President of the Senate, people were running helter-skelter in America. That is when it dawned that it is a process and therefore it is not perfect.
That's an over 200 years old democracy.
Democracy.
Are you in any way suggesting that Nigeria is doing better democratically than United States of America?
Yes. So let me speak to facts and numbers. As we speak tonight, there are National Guards in the streets of America, in the streets of California. There are National Guards heading to New York and then Chicago, United States of America. There is no city in Nigeria today, despite all our insecurity, that you find the armed forces in the streets dealing with humans. One, if you go to Amnesty International website tonight, you will not see any press release about the situation in America. That's why a lot of people say it is a neoliberal organization that oftentimes give its own report that can be seemingly seen as biased. So much hula baloo or hubris about the situation. We as a government, we recognize our onerous responsibility to preserve the lives of the people as well as their properties. We're making the needed investment, we're making the effort, we are as well engaging the Nigerian people to participate in this process, and we are transparent about it. In the midst of this cacophony, we have conducted elections, we're going to conduct elections, and if you look at the number of years we have been since the return of the Fourth Republic, you have seen that we've made progress, whether the administration is that of PDP or APC, in terms of the fundamentals of a Republican democracy. We have made progress so far. There is no interruption. There are weaknesses. There are mistakes, corruption, bad governance. We admit of that. It's all part of the process. I told you about America. They've had over 26 national conflicts since their independence. But it is not reported. That's why we talk about neoliberal something. But we have made up our mind as a government to speak to facts, also report our own peculiarities and our truth.
Mr. Sanusi, I feel like you'd like to respond, but I'll allow Biko take his turn, and then I'll get back to you subsequently. Let's bring in my senior colleague, the Biko himself. Democracy then and now. I'd like us to touch on press freedom, right? And the evolution of the fourth estate of the realm in the past 26 years.
I was very much involved in journalistic work during the military, during the years of the military. I worked in Kano, the home state of the president, and that's the home state of the head of state, General Sani Abacha. In fact, my office was located in his local government, and I can't recall that from 1993 up till the time that Sani Abacha died, I can't recall that I stayed for 3 uninterrupted months in that office. I was always on the run because I made up my mind that I would not leave Nigeria. there was a cover story that I anchored around the fact that the 1995 coup was a fake one. The military reviewed the evidence that it had, and 2 different committees came up with a report that there was no coup. Yet, Abacha was intent on killing the people they had arrested. People, journalists, innocent journalists, once you were close to someone that they did not like, they will arrest you. I talked about Chris Anyanwu the other day. Chris Anyanwu was National Assembly correspondent for NTA. And then she left NTA, started a magazine called The Sunday Magazine.
Indeed.
She was thought to be close to Lawan Gwadabe, and they locked her up. There were other people close to army officers that they had arrested in respect of that coup that didn't exist, who were also picked up and put on trial. Journalists, some journalists were jailed, like my boss, Kunle Ajibade, who was jailed for a story that I wrote. He didn't know about the story, because at the time when it was Abiola that came to my uncle's house, Akiyode, to say, Jide, you are the best person to write this cover story.
Because it sounds a lot like you're saying that a lot has evolved.
I'm heading somewhere.
Yes.
I'm heading somewhere. You know, I like to do a lot of background so that people can understand fully what we are talking about. And I'm saying this because I hear people get unnecessarily excited about military rule. These people, a lot of these people who talk about the military rule with extreme excitement. Some of them, after the election in 2023, even went to the defense headquarters to sheepishly call for military rule. We lost journalists. Some journalists were put in jail, and by the time they got back, they became insane. I don't want to mention names, but my colleagues who are listening to me know journalists who went to prison and never recovered mentally. Kunle Ajibade was locked up in in Makurdi prisons. He didn't commit any offense.
Allow me to butt in, BKO, because of our time. I just want to lead that conversation. Hold that
No, you
thought
are
for a
talking
minute.
about press freedom.
Yes,
Today,
I hear you. Because
someone
today
like
we saw,
VDM can say a lot of things.
We also saw Mr. President
You cannot do that
today.
under the military rule.
We saw the Mr. President today giving honor to some of these journalists that you've talked about, giving credence to the submission you have made.
Yes.
I want us to just quickly touch on what that means and how you think the challenges have evolved, because in those days it was about, killing press freedom. Right now, the challenge may be media independence under growing economic and political pressure. How do you relate those two challenges, and what does it mean for press freedom today?
Media, as far as I'm concerned, we are in a much better place. The things that I could do, the risk that I could not take in those days, I could take now.
All right.
Yes, no matter, I was always happy to take risk. But even then, there were some risks that we could not take, because you knew it would cost you your life. Bagauda Kalto, many people talk about Bagauda Kalto. They don't know how he died. Some of us know. And he was just a correspondent like me. We were in the same bureau. We used to do stories together. And there were several others who got missing. Sani Abacha was going to the airport. They wanted to take him through the third mainland, and he said, no, take me through the other route. I'm the commander-in-chief. They told him, no, they are protesting. He said, because I'm commander-in-chief, take me through that place. Do you know how many people were killed? People don't know anything about military rule. They are just excited about some of the fake AI-generated material coming from Burkina Faso, even portraying the guy as an excellent English speaker. if they tasted a whiff of what some of us saw, they won't be talking about military because they take away all of the freedom that you can have. The heroes that we are talking about today, many of them were jailed several times. Femi Falana was locked up in Adeja prison. I remember when his wife used to come, they would first come to my office, you know, in Kano. So press freedom, as far as I'm concerned today, there is so much press freedom. But people, all freedoms have limitations.
Indeed.
Look, I can tap Barrister Owonikoko, but if I tap him in a way that hurts him, he's going to respond.
All right.
So your rights, everybody must know that rights are not absolute in nature. So there are people who are undermining even the unity of our country by some of their unwholesome commentary. Such people need to be resisted. And if they get resisted, there's no reason for anyone to imagine that, oh, that's an abridgment of their rights. Those rights are not absolute, and lawyers will admit to that.
I think it's been a fantastic conversation thus far, ladies and gentlemen. I thought you would put your hands together for my panelists. The conversation is on, everyone. We'd like to hear from you. The live audience, prepare your questions. We'll give you 30 seconds each to probe this conversation. We'd like to hear from our viewers as well. Remember to use the hashtag TVC News Town Square. We're back with more right after this break. Stay with us.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Jackson, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
TVC News Weekend Lineup. TVC Breakfast Saturday with Kemi Fola Adeyemo and Emmanuel Ajayi. Political Standpoint with Precious Amayo. Newsweek with Mark Otabo. Politics on Sunday with Femi Akonde. Community Forum with Sarah Yeku. Get ready for the biggest stories, fresh perspectives, and burning news discussions that round up the weekend. Only on TVC News.
I'm Miriam Lunge. I'm a passionate environment advocate and a published author.
I am the founder of Celebration, a businesswoman, and a fashion icon.
I am a wealth coach and a real estate developer.
I am Amako Arakwe. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Barkamu da warhaka. I am Ramatu Shehu Oyibo, an entrepreneur and a business coach.
I am the voice of an average Muslim woman, I'm a Jabite, and a lawyer.
I am a polymath and a serial entrepreneur.
At this point, for your indulgence, so that I may put a terrible rumor to bed. To those who ring the alarm that the APC is intent on a one-party state, I offer you a most personal promise. While your alarm may be as a result of their panic, it rings an error. At no time in the past, nor any instance in the present, and at no future junction, shall I view the notion of one-party state as good for Nigeria. I've never attempted to alter any political party registration with INEC. Equally, my dear friends and colleagues, we cannot blame anybody seeking to bail out of a sinking ship. Since 2018, we have celebrated Democracy Day on this day to commemorate the sacrifices of the men and women who fought to restore democratic governance to Nigeria. Let me pay tribute to my predecessor, the former President Muhammadu Buhari, for reaching back into history to rectify a national misdeed by making June 12 Democracy Day and by officially acknowledging Chief MKO Abiola and his running mate Babagana Kingibe as the victors and the duly elected president and vice president, respectively, of Nigeria after June 12, 1993 election. Year by year, election after election, every time we debate instead of battle, we discuss instead of fight, and argue instead of destroy. We preserve the institution of democracy. More importantly, we weave the culture of democracy into very fabric of our nation. Our democracy is not invincible, but it is alive. And this means our dream of a prosperous, happy nation is still within reach and worth fighting for. Mr. Chairman, Nigeria is at an inflection point, undergoing structural and fundamental change towards a secure future.
"26 years of unbroken democracy, celebrating our wins and charting the path for the future." You're watching the maiden edition of TVC Town Square. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you, audience, for staying the course. I believe it's been a productive conversation thus far. And to the lady and gentlemen of the panel, thank you so much for staying the course. So you had that conversation peak at the issue of freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and you had BKO and Mr. Bwala saying things have improved remarkably. Dr. Abiola, I want to hear from you about what your thoughts are as regards to this.
Well, I think I disagree a little bit with the opinion of the last speaker with respect to freedom of expression. 26 years or 25 years after, I don't think we should have a situation where the civic space is still being shut down as if we are still in the military. I was surprised because if you are not talking about what we are seeing in the last 1 year, 2024, we have several records of journalists arrested at different times, in this country. And if we're talking about human rights, we can't look at it from a point of during military was more systemic, and now we can see quite a number also. So even if it's not as bad as what we're seeing during the military regime, we can still see a number, Adejuwon, Soyinka, First News, Daniel. So we can count about like 5 or 6. And if we're saying that we have shifted from the military rule, we shouldn't be talking about that in 2024. And we have also seen situations where even television houses, have been shut down, as we go along. So if we look at it, I don't think this is a good development in democracy, and it's important, for us to pick up some of this conversation, because if part of what we are saying today is charting a way forward for the country, it's important for us to be sincere, about our assessment of where our democracy is, because if we don't do that, then that means what we're doing is to chart our path, backward. And also to speak about what the whole idea about whether Amnesty International reports is Western. How? Amnesty International is reporting the security situation for some of us who work in Maiduguri. We know about some of the situations that they are reporting. So for me, I think in terms of wanting to move forward, in a democracy, we rather listen to reports that are credible. Amnesty International is one of the most credible reports in the whole world. So it has nothing to do with Nigeria. And talking about what is happening in New York and talking about what's happening in Los Angeles today, if we put that side by side with what we saw in NSAS, during NSAS, it's quite ridiculous that in Nigeria, after 1999, we are still having the kind of backlash we see when people have right to protest, even the end bad governance. This happened not quite. This is 2024. I'm in court against the government for that. You got people, rather than giving people that freedom of assembling an association, you asked them to go to a particular place. We went to those places. We had police tear gassing and shooting and dragging people out of the place. So what manner of democracy is that? So I think it's important for us in this kind of discussion to be very open and know that whatever we're contributing to the development of the
Mr. Bwala, you're hearing that there are still concerns within the civil society about freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and even human rights. Is that a priority concern for this administration?
What I know for a fact is that this administration has not only respected but preserved these rights. The president himself is a product of this struggle.
But she just made some specific examples about what happened under this administration.
Examples of freedom?
Yes.
Like BKO talked about very dark man. At least people who follow him, they see what he says. There's a lady, Aisha Yusuf. And then there is Kenneth. I'm talking of fiercest critics that sometimes in the expression of their freedom, they go beyond. But you see, let me tell you something about democracy and freedoms. And that's why I talked about Amnesty and some of these organizations. I don't cast aspersion on their person, but I speak to facts. In the United States, the Supreme Court gave interpretation on the First Amendment, this right of expression in America. It says, even if you don't like what they say, even if what they are saying is injurious to your person, that right is protected. The highest you can do is to go to court. There is no right in the United States in terms of expression that is qualified. But the laws, we are governed by laws. In Nigeria, Supreme Court has interpreted on many case laws that these rights are qualified. Meaning that in the exercise of your right, if you go beyond the limit, like BKO talked about very profoundly, you have to know where your right is limited. So let's talk about not press, let's say NSAS and some of these other organizations or individuals who move a movement. You have a right to express yourself against how government is run. If in the exercise of the rights you violate the law, what is the position of the law? Because the law must not be contrary to itself. And the law prescribes punishment for every offense that is committed. Who has the duty of maintaining law and order? And then which body interprets the right and liabilities of that individual? We have measures, we have guardrails in preserving the right of an individual. If your right is violated, go to the court and seek for the enforcement of your fundamental right. Using a brush Every time, for example, she talked about my learned senior here, talked about Maiduguri. I come from Maiduguri. There are so many reports that emanate from international organizations from Maiduguri that are outrightly false. And I can tell you that today. And let me tell you a bit again I know about intelligence. Most of these organizations that operate as NGO or civil rights or whatever, they have their funding from international bodies. I served as special advisor to the Deputy Senate President, and the Office of the Deputy Senate President piloted the constitutional amendment. I had knock on my doors every day from this civil society organization pushing an agenda for amendment of the law in one area or the other that has no correlationship with the rights and beauty of governance of the Nigerian people. So what we are saying is that there is a revolution in knowledge and information.
Right.
So it has freed our mind to a point where we do not take hook, line, and sinker a report just because an organization is known for this or known to that. We speak to facts and we defend facts.
Let me bring Mr. Sanusi into this conversation. I'm wondering how you think our data gathering system has evolved over the years, because I'm sure Amnesty doesn't expect that, like you said, we take the report hook, line, and sinker. But do you think that as a country, we also have, of course, as MBS, do you think we have that independent data gathering system that you also bounce your figures with?
Well, first of all, let me a little bit go to what Mr. Bwala earlier said about Amnesty not saying anything about the U.S. During the break, I opened my phone and I look at the website of Amnesty USA. And today, June 12th, they posted something criticizing Trump for militarizing the streets of Los Angeles. So after this moment, I will share it with you.
You just fact-checked him, right?
And yes, so the issue is, whenever Amnesty International releases a report, people, I think we have a reading problem, we have attention problem. People don't even pay attention to what we say. Number one, Amnesty International is not a court of law. We never say what we presented to the public is like a judgment about somebody. Whenever we do things, and I always believe that people who follow our work very well will understand that Amnesty International is a human rights organization. We are not interested in politics or religious issues or ideology. We are not APC or PDP. So when we are gathering data, we don't bring any sentiment because we don't do ideology, we don't do religion, we don't do anything. We do human. So when we have our standards for gathering data. So when we present data, we always say, tell the government, give us what you have. What is your data? If we say, like just before I came here, I was sent some of the most horrible things I have ever seen in my life from Plateau State. And these killings happened yesterday. I don't think anybody will look at those pictures and sleep well. So what we are saying is that if we release a data and somebody believes that they are wrong or exaggerated or have some ulterior motives, where are your own? And whatever we release a report, what we are saying is that we are just a human rights organization passionate about people living with dignity. We have investigated this and this.
I believe
you
that
are the
reports,
authority, you are the government.
Mr. Sanusi, I believe that these reports are a means to an end. You do these investigations, you do this reportage to get government attention. Do you sit with them at the table? What kind of engagement exists currently?
Well, that is you have brought in a very important issue. Whenever we do a research, we have a standard internally in Amnesty International. We give the government 3 weeks. We write to the government. We have never released a report without sharing it in advance with the government. And the reason why we do that is to, number one, give them the opportunity to challenge some of the things that we got wrong. And number two is an opportunity for them to say, okay, Amnesty, this is what we have, but we at the government, we have our own. And we adopt their own.
Does that happen?
They never respond to us. They always ignore us. And I am telling you,
perhaps we should exchange numbers
I'm telling you, I wish I knew you will ask this question. I would have come with every letter we wrote to the government and every letter that was ignored.
All right. Let us move this conversation forward a little. Senior advocate, we've seen different applications of emergency rule in Nigeria's democratic journey. In 2004, it was President Obasanjo who declared emergency rule in Plateau, right? And then in 2006, it was in Ekiti. We saw some form of emergency rule in Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno in 2013 and 2014, only that the governors were still on their seat. Earlier this year, President Tinubu ordered a form of emergency intervention in Rivers State. The conversation here has been whether these declarations were grounded in constitutional necessity or whether sometimes it served political ends. And more specifically, does Nigeria's constitution give clear enough guardrails, to prevent potential abuse of emergency powers? What are your thoughts in this regard?
Let me enter a caveat. As we speak, there are about 11 or 12 cases in respect of the Rivers State Declaration of Emergency, one of which is in the Supreme Court. I happen to be one way or the other involved in some of them, so I will be a bit constrained in going to specifics. However, the beauty of a constitution is its adaptability to varying circumstances. A constitution does not envisage crisis and how it can be managed. It's actually a bad constitution. And so, even before now, since 1960 Constitution, we have always had provision for state of emergency. And where it is properly invoked, people don't see the benefit if their personal interest is affected. But if they were to reverse and find out what will have been the possible consequence of that decision not being taken, they will appreciate why it has to be so. For the first time in Nigeria, without expressing an opinion on whether the president acted rightly or wrongly, I'll give you two facts that distinguishes the case in Rivers from all the ones we had seen since 1999. For the first time, Supreme Court of Nigeria pronounced that there was no valid government in Rivers State because the power of the legislature has been collapsed into that of the governor, and there was no legally functioning state government authority. If a president of a country who has responsibility for managing the entire country, including any part thereof, becomes aware of a judgment of the highest court, which can no longer be reversed, is the final pronouncement, and sits idle and take no step, I'm sure people will consider that to be a dereliction of his duty. That is the first thing. The second thing is that a sitting governor, I'm happy now, the governor himself has been reaching out, has visited the president, and even is now beginning to thank the president, from what I read, for even declaring a state of emergency in Rivers State. Now, I'm sure that is by the benefit of hindsight. Probably the security information and intelligence at the president's disposal when that decision was taken was not shared with him. It couldn't have been shared with him because he happened to be the center of the whole crisis. It's not like a government of a state is overwhelmed, then he goes begging to the president, please intervene with your forces to take control and restore law and order. It was a case in which the crisis actually was between the governor and the National State House of Assembly. And it had dragged for almost 1.5 years. Imagine a situation where a governor, forget about the sentiment, has had to be spending money without appropriation for 1.5 years. Just imagine that. If it was just a case of corruption of 1 billion, I'm sure there would be bedlam. But a governor spending money, revenue of the both internal and federal allocation for 1.5 years without appropriation is the height of constitutional crisis.
You know, the points you have made, Senator Advocate,
Yes.
especially the first point about the decision of the Supreme Court as regards the validity of the government in Rivers State, hasn't quite been exhaustively discussed like this. Because when Mr. President came up with that decision, he cited another portion of the Constitution, and that's where the conversation came from. That is the 1999 Constitution, as currently amended, clear as to whether or not he has the powers to make that decision. But do you think this brings us into perhaps the need to have this reviewed moving forward based on the 3 or 4 instances we've had in the past 26 years?
In fact, on the contrary, I think I had granted an interview around that period, and I explained why I felt the Constitution played its role as envisaged for the first time the best way in Section 305, because the president cannot declare emergency that will last for more than 48 hours. No matter how compelling it is. He must subject that decision to the oversight of the National Assembly and take the risk that he will not get to thirds of the House, both the Senate and the House of Reps. So for a president, the checks are there to ensure that he does not act arbitrarily or without deep foresight about what is likely to, because the reason why he has to go to National Assembly, people don't understand. National Assembly is an aggregation or representation of all the various constituencies that constitute the federation. The president acts alone, but National Assembly acts based on various constituents that were to participate in that decision. They must have gone back to their constituents and found out probably there's going to be bedlam, the entire oil and gas industry will collapse. That alone was sufficient, including, don't forget, members of House of Rep from Rivers. They were in the senators. They all voted for that. So there must be a reason why that had to be so. And don't forget, finally, that a decision for emergency does not have to last for 6 months. If situation changes and there is a need to go back to normalcy, the president does not have the need to go to National Assembly. He can on his own terminate it. And even when they approved, they said, if you have reason, don't wait for us, go ahead and terminate. So I think in this particular instance, it's a lesson. Because I said it, the president led 2/3 of the whole of National Assembly to get emergency. A governor was running with 4 members of House for about 1 hour. He couldn't win the other people to his side. There is something about statecraft that the governor has to learn. And I think he's learning now. I'm happy with the kind of... One thing that struck me was that the Niger Delta militants, who we used to be known to use also, they were the most restrained during that period. I don't know whether you observe. The young people were the ones using the right kind of languages, speaking with the president with respect, whereas the elders were the ones attacking the president. So I think the Yar'Adua's intervention in this, I think it has worked. People's psyche has changed. They are more attuned to constitutional and legal system. So I think...
Sir, we are due for a break in about 2 minutes, but I'd like to get BK's reaction to this because you trended at the time as regards your reaction to this development. What do you make of it, looking back at it now?
It's a very clear issue for me to talk about. I'm not a lawyer, but our constitution is written in English language that I understand. And once I read it, I wasn't convinced that the president had the powers to suspend democratic institutions. And I made it clear that as far as I'm concerned, no president has got the power to impose a state of emergency in which democratic institutions will be suspended. Goodluck Jonathan imposed state of emergency in the 3 states where insurgency, Boko Haram brand of killing campaign was rampant. He didn't suspend democratic institutions because he was most probably advised that, look, the constitution does not say you should do it. And at this level in my life, no matter what people know next to nothing about me think, I don't say something and take it back. It will never happen. And I stood by what I said in spite of the desire of some people working in a TV station to come with a lying propaganda that I took it back. I have said it 5 times. This is the 6th time that I'm saying that I stood by what I said. And I know the president will not do anything about it. Because I know him very well. He's a Democrat. He's not going to do anything about it. He knows it's my opinion. He respects it. I'm happy to stand by what I said. And I'm saying it again before Nigerians who were misled. But I stood by what I said. We practice our profession in one of the most difficult phases of our national life. We lost friends, innocent journalists practicing their profession. We lost friends, people close to me. So now we are in a much better place. I'm not saying that we do not have...
We have to quickly go on a commercial break.
Yes, let me just drop this line. Yes. Because my sister said she does not agree with me. It's fine. But the question you asked me, you wanted me to compare that era with what is here now. And I can say that it's a much better place.
Yes, we'll be right back after this break with more conversation. Stay with us, everyone.
Cannot hold hold a man up to a promise he made while he was naked.
In your world, where you're from, surely I would.
Only a coward awakens the love of a woman, sits back and does absolutely nothing about it.
Do you have the eye of a Lebara? Where is the eye of a shoe? Do you know what Ujo Elegbara is? Oh, well, I am going to die here. This place that nobody knows called Iluari.
At this point, I plead for indulgence so that I may put a terrible rumor to bed. To those who ring the alarm that the APC is intent on a one-party state, I offer you a most personal promise. While your alarm may be as a result of their panic, it rings an error. At no time in the past, nor any instance in the present, and at no future junction, shall I view the notion of one-party state as good for Nigeria. I've never attempted to alter any political party registration with INEC. Equally, my dear friends and colleagues, we cannot blame anybody seeking to bail out of a sinking ship. We have celebrated Democracy Day on this day to commemorate the sacrifices of the men and women who fought to restore democratic governance to Nigeria. Let me pay tribute to my predecessor, a former President Muhammadu Buhari, for reaching back into history to rectify a national misdeed by making June 12 Democracy Day and by officially acknowledging Chief MKO Abiola and his running mate Babagana Kingibe as the victors and the duly elected president and vice president, respectively, of Nigeria after June 12, 1993 election.
You're watching the maiden edition of the TVC News Town Square as we continue our conversation on Democracy Day. As we look ahead to the 2027 general elections, a key question emerges, and it has to do with what must change to make our democracy look better and work better for all Nigerians, from electoral reforms to civil inclusion, constitutional restructuring to governance accountability. The big question is, where do we start from? In this segment of the conversation, we're turning our attention to the future of Nigeria's democracy. What must change? The audience is energetic and the conversation is rife. We'll be hearing from them very shortly. You can also be a part of the conversation. Remember to use the hashtag TVC News Town Square, tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye so we can get your comments here. Thank you so much for staying the course, ladies and gentlemen. It used to be ladies, but you're representing a whole generation here. Perhaps it's a good place to start when you look at women representation in the past 26 years. What would you say we're not getting right when you compare gender parity in a country like Rwanda, for instance, or even in Kenya? What do you think is the challenge? Do we have so many men in Nigeria that it's difficult to beat the 7% that we currently have in women representation?
I think there are quite a lot of things to put into consideration when looking at women political participation in the country. The political parties have a very strong role to play in ensuring gender equality, and so we don't have that conversation yet. Nigeria is not different from other African countries. So when we even talk about the issue of patriarchy, there's patriarchy here and there's patriarchy everywhere, but there's a way in other countries that patriarchy has been deconstructed. However, the law has a role to play. If you look at what we say about Rwanda, in the 90s, there was a wave of constitutionalism, and so most countries changed their constitution. And the process of making the constitution was also changed. So there were participation of everybody, including women and persons with disabilities. And so what we then saw at that time, we saw like Uganda in 1995 coming up with a constitution that was not only speaking about inclusion, but also practicing inclusion in terms of including affirmative action for persons with disabilities and also for women. Rwanda also followed suit. South Africa has a gender equality commission, that allows for that form. But unfortunately, in Nigeria, we haven't been able to Syria alone. So we have seen that with Kenya and other places, Ethiopia, and other places in Africa. So the Constitution plays a role. And if you look at the Waste Report, for example, the Waste Report has also proposed for that form of representation for women. And of course, currently, there is also a conversation on reserved seats for women at the National Assembly. In the last constitutional reform, that was one of the topmost issues, but unfortunately, it was thrown out. So there were several issues. There are political issues. The political party, because they also lack clear ideologies. Most of the time, you see in their manifesto, they have gender equality, but in the real sense, it's not seen, even within the political party structure. Like rarely do we find women, in the board or in the structure, in the leadership, of political parties. So there's a need to re-engineer the political party structure in Nigeria. There's a need to have a law. It looks like negotiating within political party will not be enough, except if we have, a law that really speaks to representation of women. And that's what they did in Rwanda. And Rwanda is better for it. Check the GDP of Rwanda, compare it with Nigeria, and you will know what I'm saying. And if you look at most other countries where we have had women leaders, Botswana and other places, you can see that has been really, there's been a lot of development. There is no way, there's no country that should keep 50% of its population, without a voice on the table. Look at what we have in the National Assembly. How many women, do we have at the Senate? There are about 9 states in this country where we don't even have a single woman, in the State House of Assembly. So it is really, so it is actually something that we should take as a national emergency.
The quota system is one side of it. I've heard arguments where people say, you don't just give them a position because they're a woman, right? Like, if I work in TVC News and almost all my bosses are women. I mean, I have like a lineup of 3 women. My topmost boss is a woman. When women become qualified, the leadership emerges and it evolves. Do you think that's also a credible way to look at it?
Well,
like get more women equipped.
Well, that's part of the processes. But the point is this: if you look at even places where like we have apartheid and all of that, the first foundational conversation about affirmative action is the fact that people have suffered historical injustices, and that's the point we're raising as women. And that's why it's only through affirmative action that you can address. So there's a need to redress those historical injustices. And that's why, if you look at the northern part of Nigeria, there's still, in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa anyway, we have one of the highest number of girls that are out of school. There are political, there are social, there are religious issues that have deterred women, from attaining a particular position. If you recall, when we were in school, if you want to enter into university, there is about 3 ways that you can come in. There's educational disadvantaged area, there's catchment area, and there's merit. It doesn't mean that there's partiality. What it is taking into consideration is that they don't want a situation where we have an educational system where only a part of the country, go to school. Yeah. And I could remember then Lagos was one of those educational disadvantaged states. But today Lagos is no longer there. So one of the things that people need to understand when talking about affirmative action is that it's a temporary measure. If you look at Rwanda constitution, if you look at Uganda constitution, they said 20 years. After 20 years, we will step back. If you look at it in Uganda today, when they started, women were not up to 30%. But today, women are 65%. So Uganda has gotten to that level where they then need to step back, the...
I see how animated you have suddenly become, when we started this conversation. But Mr. Bwala, let me hear your honest take on what appears a shrinking political space for women in Nigeria.
So, during my time as special advisor to Deputy Senate President, when we began this constitutional amendment process, I took a personal commitment to ensure that we get more involvement of women. We drafted about 15 bills, to support that. But the challenge we had when they subjected it to a broader group of consultants, who are senior advocates and people from different fields, is that you cannot legislate to reduce the right of one by promoting the right of other. So we found our bill with respect to appointing positions very easy to make the necessary amendment, where, for example, consequently, the constitutional amendment will reflect that not less than so number of women will be federal ministers or state commissioners or people in DGs or whatever. But when it comes to elected position, you cannot legislate and say in every position, in every senatorial district or in a state, there should be 3. What we only did, which didn't sell through, was to create what we call a super seat, which should be occupied by a woman. So whether people like it or not, there will be the 4th senator in every state. There will be a seat reserved for women.
Okay.
We had a problem. And I will tell you that after 1999, we have had women speakers. Women speaker. We have had a woman governor. And we've had women proving themselves around that time. It seems over time, women started to withdraw from competing. Because if you look at the private sector, there are women execs. There are women CEO. And they rose to this position not by affirmative action. It is sheer competition by proving themselves. So when we came out of 1999, women were very, very competitive. But as time goes on, this concept of affirmative action, the negative side to it is that women tend to stay, I don't know the right word to use.
They don't want to take it.
They want it to come to them. And politics is about going because it's competition. In this Nigeria, women have proven in diverse fields
Dr.
of life.
Abiola doesn't agree with you.
Yeah, it's very possible.
You are talking about few women. Very few.
Yeah.
Because if you put in a scale where you measure, you notice that the women you are talking about, you understand that the women that you are talking about are very few. Who have been able to achieve that position that you are talking about. But we're talking about a country where we have 49.7% women.
Look at, for example, the administration of the president. He has given opportunities for women in key places, and they are proving themselves in the role.
When he was in Lagos?
Even as a president. Women should compete, but we will do our best to ensure that we'll increase the participation. Because I know that you will look at other factors such as culture in Africa affecting, especially in Nigeria, affecting the entrenchment. If you go to the northern Nigeria, women participate, but you have less women participating as opposed to if you come to the southern Nigeria. And I believe it's a work in progress. We have to double up. But then I'm giving you one possibility behind the sort of recession of women in political participation. We need to have woman chairman of a national political party. Then we need to have women running for the position of national treasurer and secretary. That is how you begin to get elective positions for women.
I hear you, and I think we have a perfect gender mix for that conversation. We'll get back to you subsequently. I'm coming to you, Mr. Sanusi, but let me get to the senior advocate very quickly, because some of the pillars of democracy has to do with rule of law, human rights, and what have you. And many of the conversations we've had here today gets back to the judiciary. You have talked about the independence of the Electoral Commission, but there's still the valid question of whether or not our judiciary is independent. You see, most of our elections still end up in courts. And it speaks to a flawed electoral system. Some argue that it is mischief on the part of those who have lost. But there remains the real concern of undue influence by politicians on our judiciary. Where are we, and what must be done differently?
Thank you. I think sometimes we mistake the judicial exposure to influence with lack of independence. When it comes to adjudicatory independence, Nigerian judiciary has adjudicatory independence, because there has been no instance where non-judicial officers have been writing judgments for them. But because they have not insulated themselves from political influence, the bias of their interests tend to reflect in how they adjudicate, especially politically involved cases. And I've said to you that the judiciary has bastardized electoral jurisprudence in Nigeria as a result of this, not consciously, but in their belief that as a third arm of government, one of their duties is to protect the stability of the state. They tend to give judgment on electoral disputes in a manner that shows that they are more interested in stabilizing the system rather than being unduly proactive. But the country that we are requires proactive judicial activism. For instance, today, I was with a colleague of mine yesterday, and he said they went to cite one of the judgments of Supreme Court in Botswana in an election matter. Now, Supreme Court in Nigeria will say that every single dispute you want to establish, you must call an eyewitness from the polling unit, regardless of the nature of it. It has got to the point that it's almost impossible now, unless we're talking about disqualification, to achieve anything in court over electoral dispute when you are the one trying to establish some form of dispute. And they said, look, they can't understand the jurisprudence. That a document has been brought that shows something has gone wrong. You say you must call a witness physically who witnessed it in polling unit. And then one of the reasons we amended the constitution to give time limit for electoral dispute was because they realized that if you are to challenge election, presidential election, you probably need to call about 30,000 witnesses in a space of about 3 months. How is that possible? So they then decided, look, let's limit the time, and they introduced provisions that say, look, if malpractice are manifestly disclosed on document, you don't need to call a witness because everybody can look at the document and decide it. Yeah. Now, the jurisprudence of Nigeria, the way it is, the court has ruled, after we thought that was an escape route, to say that notwithstanding that provision that the legislature has come in to provide, you must still come and speak to the document. And if you are not the one who participated at the lowest level of election, what you are saying is hearsay. So it's almost, and then that is very important for our democracy, because when people begin to lose trust on the dispute resolution process after election, it can negatively impact the perception of how our democracy works. So there is need for intentionality about how we proceed in reforming our electoral dispute, number one. Number two is that it's not even necessary that you must always go to court for election. But I did a study more than 30 years ago, and I realized, and I keep on advocating this, there's a fundamental dysfunctionality in the way we run our own electoral system. And the reason why other political democracies are stable is the way they structure power, that people don't go to office and leave at the same time. So they don't conspire to return themselves. All right. America has sustained this because every 2 years since 1770, there's always a need to go back for the electorate to reconfirm their mandate. Either you go for midterm election or presidential. And when one is going, it's not all the officers that are at stake. So people can actually accept defeat because they know they only have 2 years to wait. Something else can happen. It may not be them, but they can flip the House of the Congress. The president might lose majority in the Congress, even though he's still the president.
I hear Senator Rafkin.
So please, let me just stop you that. So there are some things we need to interrogate in how we structure the system itself.
Let's get this conversation to our live audience and hear from them. You have 30 seconds to ask your questions. Let me know. Oh, I see one hand, two, beautiful, 3 and 4. Can we get the mics to them so we can hear from them quickly as regards their contribution? Your name and your question.
All right. My name is Julius Adebayo. Thank you for this wonderful town square, and I appreciate the submission so far. I have an observation, and also, okay, thank you. I have an observation and subsequently a question. Ma'am, I love your submissions, but then I actually observed that you've not been able to speak about some of our advancements in the democratic journey. So, in your previous assertions, you said there's a concerted effort to gag the media. And you also made mention of the fact that there was attack
like
on
to
TV stations.
To the question precisely.
Yes, you said, no, the observation first.
You have 30 seconds and you run out of time.
So
just
on the
go
press
straight
freedom,
to the question, yes.
I actually remember that during the NSAS regime, rather than the government attack innocent Nigerians, we had a situation where Nigerians, some unscrupulous Nigerians, attack a TV station and burnt it to ashes. I do not think such would have happened under a dispensation that was not democratic.
All right.
Then to the question now. Okay. Is it possible that there has been areas where we've advanced and left situations where Nigerians do not begin to ask for situations in Burkina Faso to happen in Nigeria?
All right.
Thank you.
That wasn't a good example for the 30 seconds time you have to ask your question. So I'm hoping that I don't have to stand up to hold the mic myself. All right, let's get another question in quickly.
So good day, sir. I have a question for you, sir. My first question is, since the disbandment of the NSAS during October 2020, we've had a lot of issues concerning police brutality. So I want to ask, what step has the federal government taken after that? Because we've heard about a lot of police brutality after the disbandment of NSAS.
Okay.
All right. Next question, please.
Good day, sirs. My question is, do you think Nigerians are actively participating in democracy, or we are just a spectator today? Like, are we practicing it, or we are just a spectator?
And then we'll take one more question.
All right. Good day, everyone. My name is Princess Joseph. Here's my question. So elections here are basically, or is basically, one of the most important outplay or display of democracy. But the issue is that I think a huge ton of Nigerians are discouraged because we don't see transparency. We feel, the majority of us feel that there is little to no transparency in the election. So what structures can we put in place to bring about a sense of conviction that our elections are transparent?
All right, so perhaps how do you had a specific question, right? And you remember it about a balanced mix of good and bad as to what has happened in, yes, beautiful. But let me come to Mr. Bwala quickly to get your reaction to what he talked about transparency in elections. Yes.
So we have the executive branch of government, and you have the other two branches. Part of what the executive branch of government does is to implement the Constitution, to enforce the Constitution. And in the course of implementing and enforcement of the Constitution, there would always be need to progress. So if you look at 2011, after the election, first of all, you start with Yar'Adua, who said the process that brought me was flawed, and we introduced reform. He did. When Jonathan was approaching the election, there was this outcry by his party people that you don't have to reform the election because you will lose the election. He said even if he will lose, there was a reform. When Buhari came, he did what he could. With this administration, you see those sweeping reforms we are bringing into transparency, as far as INEC and the conduct of election is there. That's the whole idea of democracy. But the good thing is that at every given time, the executive acts of government can always be checked by the court. So if the executive branch or agency of government carries out a function that you think is ultra-vires, unconstitutional, you go to the court, you test the veracity of that action. So we are perfectly moving the democracy. I wanted to also, because he also asked one question in relation to the protests and all that. If you noticed, last year there was a protest that called on military intervention in Nigeria. The president at no time asked that the people should be stopped from the protest. They did that for a number of days, 11 or so. He was constantly communicating to the Nigerian people, I hear your cry, I know what you're going through. That is how you entrench democracy. You don't gag the people. I also gave you an example of freedom of expression by different people, and the content of that expression, most of which can clearly lead to, locking people and arresting them. But on many occasions, they were allowed to just fizzle out. Because we also, as a government, realize that there are some people, they deliberately attack the government to get the government attention. So we ignore them. It's a free society. People can express themselves. But when you commit a crime, the state cannot watch that the state goes down without,
Mr. Sanusi, let me get your reaction to the second and third question. The young man is asking whether Nigerians are actively participating or just being spectators in this democracy. And then there's another thing about police brutality.
Well, as far as the participation of Nigerians is really deeply worrying. because if you remember, every election cycle we are having increasing voter apathy. And even during the last election, if you compare the percentage of registered voters with the actual people that voted, the number of votes is really disturbing. Many people stay away from elections maybe because of disenchantment with how leaders deliver. Many people stay away because of fear of violence. Many people stay away because they think it is an exercise in futility. So I think political leaders have to have a rethink. We should not have a situation whereby one day we will open a polling unit and only 2 people will come, or you have to use Indomie or bars of soap or something to convince people to go and vote. People should be waiting at the polling station to vote. And I believe that democracy is about the people. So I believe that from now to 2027, every political office holder should be, even not only political, every one of us should be worried. People should be actively participating.
Right.
And without people's participation, I believe that we will end up with a lot of issues. On police brutality, after NSAS...
Hold up that. I'm going to add that to your next question. Okay. But let me hear from BK quickly. That voter apathy is huge. There seems to be there's a huge trust deficit between those who are governed and those who are governing them. They just feel like once you get into power, you've lost touch with reality.
Yes.
And then they just leave you to your side like, well, you don't even know what's happening. You're in Abuja enjoying life. How do we bridge that gap? Because he asked, many of us are just spectating. We're not really participating in this democracy.
Yes, I think that the political parties have so much work to do in terms of improving voter awareness, political education, and I also think that the National Orientation Agency has a lot to do by way of talking to our people, engaging our people, and getting them to realize that, look, their voter card is power in their hands, and they should see voting in an election as fun. It should be something like a carnival, a day when voters exercise their power over political office holders. There is a lot that good governance can bring about.
The National Assembly recently shut down the bill to, enforce that everybody votes.
No, it was a ridiculous bill.
Yeah.
It was a thoroughly senseless bill to try to force people to vote. There's nowhere in the world where I've seen that happen. Even Kagame, who would not agree to have less than 95% of the people elect him, has never forced people to go and vote. So it was a sensible thing to put that bill in the trash can. What I'm saying is, a succession, if we have the 3 electoral cycles that deliver solid, good governance to the people, the perception of our people will change. They will be much more involved in electing their leaders because they will want that progress to continue. Leaders must be accountable. What we find in Nigeria is that at different levels, people in government do not think they are responsible to the Nigerian people. And that is actually, getting the people detached from how they are governed. They are not as interested as they should be. Many people are giving up on our country. I have been telling Nigerians that, look, you don't need to give up on your country. This country can still be better, but political leaders have a lot to do. Political office holders have a lot to do to get Nigeria, especially the young people. The young people have the voting numbers, but a lot of them are political.
Indeed.
A lot of them are interested in movies, interested in computer games, and all. They don't show enough interest in politics. And
For
if you look
obvious
at people, Awolowo and the rest of them, they were very active politically when they were in their 20s.
For obvious reasons, they say that, you know, we're not even feeling the impact of whoever we're voting for. So why vote in the
That
first
is
place?
why I said
Yes.
that if we have 3 electoral cycles that deliver very good leaders who make good things happen, that perception will change. It happened in Botswana. Today, Botswana is the pride of our continent. People are happy to vote. People are happy to get
Okay,
involved.
we're due for another break. So I apologize, I have to continue.
You always use my time for break. When we leave this place, we'll talk about
after the show. We are back with more right after this break, everyone. Don't go away.
and cable. Great quality, now with the new look.
I know if you forget.
Brought to you by the National Orientation Agency, NOA.
On assuming office, Tim and I moved to reform our ailing economy. We introduced fundamental reforms to correct structural imbalances that prevented maximum growth. We are already seeing results. The GDP grew by 3.4% in 2024, with Q4 hitting 4.6%, the highest quarter of growth in over a decade. Inflation is easing gradually, steadying the price of food staples like rice and beans. Our net foreign reserve have increased fivefold, and the Naira exchange rate has stabilized. Our balance of payment position is positive. Our sovereign credit rating is improving, and we continue to promote oil and non-oil gas export. State do not need to go about borrowing to pay salaries anymore. In less than 1 year, over 100,000 Nigerians, including 35,000 civil servants, have benefited from affordable consumer credit through the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation, enabling them to purchase vehicles, light up, and improve their well-being, and purchase life essentials.
The TVC News. Thank you so much, everyone. We have a very vibrant audience here. The TVC Town Square is still in session. Our conversation is on Democracy Day. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. Let's take a couple of comments online. Remember, the hashtag to use is TVC News Town Square. This is from Imafido. Imafido says, this is a lovely program that provides the right history of our country's progress from the First Republic via the incursion of the military and now 26 years of unbroken democracy. One question for Amnesty International. Where's there no bulletin from the riot in U.S.? I think that he made that mention earlier that there's actually a publication on that from Amnesty International United States. Yotas Mansi says, great discussion on democracy progress. And another person here is talking about the need to focus on production. Okay, I'm not sure I got that quite well. But it says focus on improvement. Not very clear message, but keep your messages coming and we'll be here to take them as well as take questions also with our live audience. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying the course on the program. A round of applause for yourself. We're going to get more questions from the audience, but I'll give BKO 2 minutes to really wrap up his thought as regards that specific question or what has been done aftermath the answers.
Yes, I think first and foremost, we lost an opportunity to have the police reformed. At that time, I remember our friend Innocent, the late Innocent, Clean Foundation, was a member of the panel that government set up to reform the police, look at the wages of the police, do something about police welfare, and find a solution to constant report of police brutality, extrajudicial killings, and all that. There was a particular video of a policeman saying, Oga, give me the honor of killing him. Give me the guy was running around the bus, and that officer shot him. The boss actually gave him the honor of shooting the guy. So how do you kill people in broad daylight? So the then vice president said they saw some of those videos and they were really, really sad. They didn't know that it was that bad. But the NSAS organizers refused to send representatives to that panel. They were trying to copy what was happening in Hong Kong. But it cannot happen in Nigeria. You still need leaders. You need leaders that will get involved with government, engage with government so that we can find a solution. We lost that opportunity, but SARS was disbanded. The members were were told to go to Abuja, where they were profiled, so that those who do not deserve to remain in the police were then sent packing. They also conducted tests on them to discover those who were guilty of substance abuse. They never released the report of that because I knew a good number of them were on drugs, and that was why they were misbehaving. So today, as a result of that agitation, we do not have SARS anymore. We still have some of the tactical units of the police, but they are far more better behaved now than that time, because today, if you get recorded as a policeman taking bribe from anyone or being involved in police brutality, they do not waste time. That is one Nigerian, how do I describe them now? The police is a Nigerian entity that constantly weeds out the bad eggs from its ranks. Right. I've not seen any other profession, whether journalism or law profession, where from time to time the black legs are identified, publicly disgraced, their uniforms taken off them, and then sent packing. So I think we've made some progress in that area, but we would want that progress to continue, and the police reform that was put in abeyance has to happen, so that we'll have the police that we can all be proud of.
Mr. Sanusi, you're sitting with the figures. Do you agree with him? Have we made improvement after NSAS?
Well, yeah, as he said, NSAS was disbanded, and but as a human rights organization, every day we receive reports of police atrocities. It's just that the police atrocities have changed their nature. Their nature, the manner has changed. One thing that I just want to give an example is that there was this culture in the Nigerian police that is very dangerous and still perpetuating this impunity, when a policeman commits atrocity like torture or extrajudicial execution, the only thing they do is to transfer him to another part of the country. So I also agree with him that we lost the opportunity with the momentum of NSAS to carry out a comprehensive police reform. That opportunity has been lost, and that is why almost every now and then you hear about police atrocities, extortion, torture. They are still going on. Therefore, we need to do that comprehensive, thorough, concrete police reform. We need it because young people are still complaining. With just carrying a smartphone will put you in danger. Just driving a flashy car as a young person or carrying a MacBook will make the policeman to ask you, where did you get? So we need to do that reform, and police atrocities has to stop because Nigerian youths are saying enough is enough.
Thank you, Mr. Sanusi. Let's take 3 more questions for the last segment of this conversation. We're back to our live audience. Anyone with questions?
Sorry, please. Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
On this panel, we have at least 3 lawyers.
Yeah, okay.
Otitoju made a comment, and it will be remiss of us not to intervene. That only police discipline their erring officers. I'm sorry.
There's consistency.
Now, let me explain
They do it with a regularity that I don't see.
Please, let me just interject here.
Okay.
I'm sure you are aware that less than 2 months ago, 2 judges were dismissed, and a court of appeal judge was suspended for 1 year. There is a body that is charged constitutionally with discipline of judicial officers. There is a body by law that disciplines lawyers, Legal Practitioner and Disciplinary Committee, and their decisions are actually in the law reports. We don't publish them on newspaper, but you have news report of it. In fact, every lawyer that has erred faces Legal Practitioner Disciplinary procedure.
I think you have very well defended the law profession.
Thank you.
Perhaps the other professions will also come at Biko Online and then get his reply. Let's take 3 more questions. Okay, yes, sir, please.
Good day, everyone.
Your name and your question.
Emmanuel Ayodeji. So my question is for Barrister. It's a 2-in-1 question. How independent is Nigeria's judiciary in practice, and what role does that independence play in protecting democracy?
All right. Next person, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lamidi Ayuba. My question goes thus. As a young student leader, and they are talking about politics, and it's kind of my interest. So I have this question. What was the plan for the youth concerning the incoming, this present government? What plan do they have for the youth that are participating in government actively?
All right. One final question.
Good day. My name is Abiodun Thomas, and my question is pertaining to the youth participation in electoral positions. In the past, we've had youth and younger ones as head of states, but transitioning to the democratic era, it seemed like the table has turned around. Why does it seem like our older generations are not giving we, the younger people, a chance in electoral positions, going down from the party levels down to the main elections? Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Please put your hands together for them, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Abiola, Thomas is saying that it's easier for younger people to lead in military rule than in democratic dispensation. What's happening?
Well, I think that we need to fix our politics, and that's very important. And so let me speak to the what we can call the triangular approach to politics, which I think the country needs to look at. And I'm going to take that from a 3-point of view. One of the reasons why we're still having the crisis that we're having is because we don't have value-driven political class. And we need to say that. Irrespective of whatever we see that is ongoing in the last 26 years, there's still a huge challenge with the political class. There's lack of political ideology. There is a lot of godfatherism. There are so many things that are affecting our budding democracy that would not make us to get to where we want to get to, and that would affect the young people. Because if there is no clarity in terms of ideology in any political party system, it's very difficult for marginalized groups like young people, like women, persons with disabilities, to be able to attain any position. Now, and if you look at the role of the youth in the last few years, there was a not too young to run law, that was passed. And one would have expected that after the passage of that would have increased the number of, young people in politics. You can see that law has not been able to adequately address that problem because the political class is not value-driven. The political class is not following, the rudiments of the laws that they even made, by themselves. The second issue is that, of course, there must be reforms, both electoral and constitutional reforms. We have been toying and playing with electoral and constitutional reform for years in this country, and there is a need for us, to begin to then start taking our issues one by one. People talk about the need for us to have the Electoral Offences Commission, as a way of addressing some of the problems. We cannot continue to turn all our election results to the courts. The courts cannot be that determines, the right of people to be able to vote. So we need to look at our electoral laws. We need to look at our constitution. And the third issue which I want to raise in terms of what we need to do in terms of fixing politics is that the citizens, there is also the issue about citizens' participation. If the citizens are not standing to hold the government accountable, if we are not raising the question that we need to raise about the kind of middle class and the kind of political class that we have today, it is very difficult for us to be able, to address our problems. So I just thought that is important, and that affects the participation of the youth, affect the participation of Nigerian people. And of course, on the issue of the NSAS that he had raised earlier, my question would rather be, why did he allow it to happen? So the question of strong institutions is also important. If we have institutions that are strong, that are effective and efficient, probably there would never be. Where there are accountability systems, if you found a situation where a police head, there is someone you can call. We don't need to go to the social media. Most of the things we see today is because the social media is telling us this is what the police did, then they will react. They should not be reactive. People should be able to hold the police accountable through a process that is open and transparent. Until when we have those institutions.
Thank you so much. We have a very limited time. We have just about 5 more minutes to go. So I'm going to have you react in 1 minute to Lamide's question, what this government is doing for the young people.
Our government by far is not only interested in youth empowerment, but has demonstrated by the various executive orders and opportunities that the president and his administration has provided for the youth. I know that whenever we talk about youth engagement and participation, our mind goes to elective positions. But there is this thing called disruption. Power is not given, you take it. And even not too young to run that came into force at the time was because of the disruption caused by the youth. Nothing comes to you, you have to take it. But in terms of our government, if you look at the NEL Fund, for example, it's a government policy to ensure that young people have access to education. If you look at skill acquisition program, it is to empower the youth. If you look at the NYSC raise, of their allowances, it is still the intention of the government to ensure that youth are in a position where they can compete. If you look at the government of President Bwala Tinubu, 90% of special advisors and senior special assistants are youth. The ministers are youth. In those days, when you go to government institution and you're looking for senior special assistant, not even special advisor, you're looking at somebody from 65 years. But if you look at the government, look at the cabinet of the president, and look at how the youth are doing. So this administration by far is leading by example in creating opportunities for the youth.
Mr. Sanusi, let me have your pattern shot in 1 minute.
Well, I have to say again and again that democracy is the best system, and we have to do everything to safeguard it. We all have to understand that, we have issues, but this is the best thing that we can ever have. We all have a responsibility to protect this democracy because it is the only system that guarantees our freedom. We have to also be aware that, there is consistent and systematic campaign to undermine democracy, both internally and externally, and we have to resist it because it is the only system that provides us with the freedom to sit here and say our minds, go back home and sleep. So we have to all play our role to protect this democracy because it is the only system that allows us to live with dignity and freedom.
Mr. Owonikoko, Emmanuel has asked a very simple question. I'm hoping you can give a simple answer. How independent is the Nigerian judiciary? Maybe from a scale of 1 to 10.
I'll say that it depends on at what level. We have different levels of judiciary in Nigeria. At the federal level, the question of financial autonomy is no longer an issue. Yeah. They have fully been given control over their, both for capital and recurrent expenditure. It's at some state levels that governors still play overload on them in terms of financial autonomy. And once you have financial autonomy challenge, all other independence
I'm hoping you can disabuse the minds of some Nigerians. Is it true that politicians can influence the decision of the Supreme Court?
Supreme Court is made up of human beings who interact. So there's a way in which politicians can influence, not necessarily to undermine judgment, but to present a political case, a policy choice that the Supreme Court will see a need to validate. Right. If, for instance, there's a challenge that they think can bring down, you have to give that information to the court in a way that they will appreciate that, yes, they're actually not serving it, but they're actually overall interest on it. An example, when President Buhari reversed Supreme Court in terms of cashless, Supreme Court went back and reversed President Buhari. That shows to you.
All right. Biki, you have 2 more minutes to go. Let me have your parting shot. I'm going to give you 1 out of my 2 minutes.
Well, remember that when we leave this place, I can deal with you. I'm happy to be alive at a time when the military is not in power. I do not pray to see them back in power. And we must do our best, just as my brother said, to defend democracy. We may not be happy with some of what is going on. In terms of where Nigeria should be, I think we all have our opinions that we can do much better. But we have an obligation to defend democracy and disabuse the minds of people who were in their diapers when we had military rule, who do not know the dangers inherent in military rule, and they are actually calling for it out of viral ignorance. Indeed. So let's do our best to defend democracy, but the people in power should also do their best to guarantee good governance in a manner that will take Nigeria to the next level.
Thank you so much. I hope I've redeemed myself.
You tried.
Because I allowed you to finish this time.
You tried, but you still...
Should I pass for your parting shot?
Yes.
Or you want to say something in 30 seconds?
Well, I believe that we need to fix politics, as I said.
Your mic. Yes.
I believe that we need to fix politics, as I said, and we need strong institutions. We need very active citizens. The country cannot change without us. So it's important for us to participate in changing Nigeria.
I think we've had a truly honest conversation today. Ladies and gentlemen, do you agree with me? Come on, put your hands together for them. And I also believe that we've had a very vibrant live audience. Some of them students, young Nigerians showing keen interest in the development of our democracy. Put your hands together for yourselves once again. I want to say a big thank you to all of you on behalf of the TVC Newsroom for coming. Thank you for coming, Dr. Abiola, and every other person on my panel. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. It's the media edition. Hopefully you will come again when we invite you.
Yes. Anytime.
And thank you, audience, for making it into TVC News. Democracy is not a destination. It's a continuous journey, one that demands reforms, rights, and real representation. But the conversation doesn't end here. It continues tomorrow on Beyond the Headlines, 6 p.m. every weekday, as we dig even deeper into the future of our democracy. Until then, thank you to our panelists, our live audience, and to you for watching. And now the town square goes on recess. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Happy Democracy Day and good night.
A thriving city is a place where food is accessible, affordable, and available. You grab, you go. The United Nations projects that Lagos population could rise to about 36 million by 2050.
Now is the time to reorganize.
With cases of climate change, desertification, and increasing